This is Capital Games Movie Club. I'm the Wiz.
And I'm Kim Shactman.
Kim, how are you doing today?
Good.
So we are here today to review the 1973 animated film Fantastic Planet, directed by Rene Laloux. Kim, before we get started with the review, I have to ask, because this is kind of weird for most people who aren't really into film when it comes to animated films. Before this movie, when was the last time you watched an animated film?
Like outside of Disney?
They're animated. I mean, I'll put this.
I love Disney movies and Pixar, so I've watched them all the time. But other than that, never.
I mean, they are animated movies.
So yeah, it counts, right?
Yeah, it counts, definitely. Yeah, because the thing I come across with people that when they find out I'm really into movies and one of my all-time favorite movies is animated, is basically, don't you grow out of that? Is basically what I get, and I get that quite a bit too from people who don't seem to realize that a lot of animated movies nowadays are actually made for adults. I look at movies like Akira, Ghost in the Shell, things like that, and this movie that we're going to be reviewing too, Fantastic Planet. But there is a stigma with animated films that if it's animated, it's for kids. Most films in the United States are, yes. Mm-hmm. But for the most part, if you look throughout the entire world, that's not true. There's a lot of animated movies, especially from Japan, that are made for adults, the ones I've just mentioned. When I mentioned that one of my all-time favorite movies, which is Spirited Away, is an animated film, it kind of gets people surprised a little bit. Like, oh, really? You know, you're into kids' movies? I was just curious when the last time that you watched an animated film. What was the last animated film did you see?
God, I don't even know.
It's been a while?
Totally put me right on the spot there. Yeah, it's been a while, but I mean, when I grew up as a kid, I was in the 90s era, so it was Disney, like everything was Disney.
Well, the Disney films around that time were actually very good. We're talking about Little Mermaid, Aladdin, Lion King. Yeah.
Yes, so. We are my parents would plop us in front of the TV, throw in the VHS and be like, here you go, Aladdin and all those. So, I mean, I think too, the minute, I don't know if this goes for anyone else, but the minute you think of animation, Disney has created such a brand for themselves that you automatically think Disney.
No, absolutely. Yeah. They earned that, and there have been people that have been trying to break that. Illumination nowadays does that with Minions and with Despicable Me. DreamWorks did it with Shrek. It has been lately that in animation that Disney has taken a back seat to those two companies, and then if you are into film like I am, or even maybe into animation, Studio Ghibli is what people would consider the best in animation at this point. So, yeah.
Yeah, so I guess for adults, more considered adult animation, I have never seen more of an adult animated film.
Oh, okay.
Ever.
Yeah, so I guess I have to introduce you to some Studio Ghibli. Me and Zero are really into Studio Ghibli, so we would have to probably introduce you to that at some point. Okay, let's review Fantastic Planet, directed by Rene Laloux. Kim, let me ask you, when we decide to watch this movie, why don't you reiterate your thoughts on the film when I showed you exactly what we're watching?
I was like, okay, this is interesting. Completely out of my comfort zone. Mm-hmm. It has subtitles. I cannot remember the last time I watched a movie with subtitles and watched the whole thing, right? But surprisingly, that didn't bother me.
No. For a lot of people, subtitles do not bother people when they watch movies. And when I realized it didn't bother me, I watched a movie called 8½ when I was in high school. That I absolutely adored, and I realized within 10 minutes that, the subtitles don't bother me. Great.
Right.
So I was ecstatic. When you're okay with the subtitles, your palette of movies really opens up, because in America,
all the different languages. Yeah.
Not only just the different languages, but the different styles of films that you can watch, and the different twists that they can do, because a lot of the movies that come out from other countries, they make them specifically for those countries. So there's a different subtext and a different type of way that they film and do stories. So that really opens up your palette to what you can actually watch. I loved, when I realized that, I was like, oh, great. So I started really opening up to other types of films, like from Fellini, Kurosawa, films from Iran, Japan, China. Like, I went crazy at a certain point with films from other countries. So it's good that was the one thing I was curious about with you is
it didn't really bother me, but I noticed like it was easier to follow on an animated film than like a regular film.
Really?
Yeah, like I don't know why, like maybe because of just the way, like the cadence to this specific film too. I don't know.
Well, this is a very simple film, which is the one thing I want to say right off the bat is that for a film that looks as strange and as weird as it did on, let's say, the cover of the Criterion Collection disc.
Yeah, the cover looks like that was one of my first. I was like, oh God, what is he getting me into?
Yeah. I checked the violence and everything before we watched this, and it wasn't that bad. But
so just from like a weird story perspective, I was like, what is going on here with the cover? And there's like a couple of different covers. Yeah, I noticed. So
I mean, this has been released on other platforms too. So there is the standard poster. So when I go on the Criterion Collection site, well, usually for a sale to see what I'm interested in getting, this would constantly pop up, and I was fascinated by it because it looked incredibly weird. But because it had a very unique style to it, I didn't really read up on exactly what it was about. So I was like, oh, this must be... All I kept hearing is, oh, it's surrealistic, it's weird, it's odd, it's this and that. I'm like, okay, that might be something I'm into. So I'm thinking like a David Lynch movie, like Mulholland Drive, Inland Empire, like something really strange that you would have to envelope yourself into. And that's not this movie at all. It just looks strange. It looks... The animation reminds me of the Monty Python skits from like Holy Grail and Meaning of Life, the animated ones by Terry Gilliam. That's what the animation reminded me of. But if you take away the look and the animation, this is a very basic story.
But I was kind of glad.
Okay.
Because it was my first one.
Okay.
Right? Like my first adult animation and more like, you know, getting used to subtitles. So I was kind of glad it was simple.
Sure. No.
So I could follow it.
Okay. Good point. I just was kind of surprised that as I was watching this, I was like, oh, so let's get into what the story is. Basically, you're following an which is a human in the strange planet. He was orphaned as a kid when a bunch of these drogs, who are the alien species that are like, about 30 feet tall in the movie.
Yeah, they're huge.
Yeah, when these drogs basically killed their mother by accident. Well, not by accident, but they essentially killed her.
They were like, it almost looked like they were trying to like use the mother as like a play toy, but they ended up killing her.
Right. The drog in the film takes Terror in and raises him as their pet. And the film basically goes from that to a captor-captee type of movie. Something you would see like in, I guess, in like something like Gladiator.
Like survival of the fittest.
Yes, it gets to that point as well in the movie. When I realized that's what the film was about, I was like, oh. I was expecting something a lot more experimental and weird.
Yeah.
So when that plot started going on, I was like, oh, okay. So this is... So my
basic.
Yes, my perception of the film was like very weird and experimental, but actually I was really disappointed when I realized that this was a very basic type of film. And I mean basic because there is next to no depth to any of the characters in the movie. But again, this is like a short movie. This is 75 minutes.
It was so short, and again, I was kind of like, okay, this is consumable for me, being one of my first ones.
Yeah. So with that, I sat there, watched the movie, and I definitely thought the animation was interesting. But after a few minutes, it lost its effect on me pretty quick. At first, I was like, wow, this film looks weird and off and odd, and I'm kind of digging it. But after like 10 minutes, I was like, yeah, I'm over it. I'm kind of over this.
Have you ever read or seen the book Where the Wild Things Are?
I read the book when I was a kid, a long time ago. The movie, which is directed by Spike Jonze, I haven't seen yet.
I haven't seen the movie either. But the colors and the sketching of the animation of this film reminds me of that book, like, to a T.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I agree with you. It definitely has and like I said, like, it has a very unique art style that must have been really hard to animate at that time.
I was going to say that 1973 is when it came out, right?
Right. I don't think there was rotoscoping at the time. What rotoscoping is where they take either an animated or a live action shot and they animate over that. That's rotoscoping.
Interesting.
Right. So that's rotoscoping. And I don't think that was even invented around that time. So they had to literally animate that specifically the way it was. But the way that the colors are, it's sketched in, they had to make those sketches exact through every cell of the thing, which I had to imagine that had to be difficult to do. I'm not saying that it wasn't hard to do this, but by the middle of the movie, the effect of that art style really lost its effect on me, like, really quick. I think it had a lot to do with the fact that the story was pretty basic and uninteresting to me.
I mean, it kept my attention just because I wanted to see what happened at the end, because I was waiting for some, like, really weird or different twist or ending, and it was just like, oh. It was kind of like a letdown.
The only thing that's weird about the movie is the look of the movie, just the way that the film looks. But when it comes down to what happens in the story and everything, it's all easily explainable.
Right.
And it's not really that weird, except for maybe like one or two things. We'll get right into spoilers. We're not going to have a spoiler section, but we might as well just get into some sort of spoilers in this. The only thing I really found kind of weird was the meditation scenes, where the little balls of the drogs would float up in the air. But it's easily interpreted as their thoughts of their higher power to a certain extent. Or it's actually explained at the end of the movie, really, what it was.
Yeah, it's like they're going to, like, another planet to get energized.
Yeah, which is like, okay, cool, I guess, but...
Who cares? You're just kind of like, I don't know, like, they're battling, and they're, between the Oms and the drag.
That didn't happen until towards the end of the movie.
Yeah, like... Again, it's supposed to be based on this one named Ter. They name him Ter. I don't know.
Yeah.
And from the time he's born till, like, comes into his own, basically, with his species.
Mm-hmm.
And it's, like, interesting. I don't know. I thought it was funny when they had him as, like, a toy.
Yeah.
Like, the little girl or the girl drag or whatever, the daughter, had him as a toy.
Yeah.
But they don't, but the drags, even though they had them as, what did they call them? They called them
tamed tears?
Tamed, yeah.
Tamed Oms?
They're like tamed and wild Oms or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Like, the father, like, was like, no, like, Oms are bad. Like, they're bad. They want to kill us and all this stuff. And it's like, dude, you're like 100 feet taller than this. Like, you're huge. Like, how can these little things take you guys down? Like, it just kind of didn't make sense to me, but okay.
Yeah. Like, this was definitely, I keep saying basic, but it's true. It is a basic no-frills story involving captors and captees, where one rises up against their captors, essentially, is what this is. And I'm fine with that kind of story, but I want more to it. And even though this is just a 75-minute movie, I really felt disappointed after I watched it. 'Cause if it was going to be that basic of a story, then give me something to chew on. Give me something weird. Give me something that's unique about this.
Right.
And the only thing that was unique is just the way it looked. And again, after a few minutes, I was like, okay, it's unique, but it's not really grabbing me all that much.
Yeah, the story. There's no, like, in-depth story there. It's just what it is. But I want to actually point out, I really enjoyed the music.
Ah, the 70s porn music, yes.
Is that what you call it? I thought it was, like, good, though, like, for each scene. Like, it fit very well.
It's kind of weird. I'm calling it 70s porn music as a catch-all. I don't think it really constitutes as that. But I think that, yeah, it is interesting music, and it fits the vibe of the movie to a certain extent. It's very distinctive. But again, like, for a movie that I think is much more about its style and its look and its feel, it just did not grab me at all. It was, like, the story is fine, don't get me wrong, and it kept me engaged throughout. But the intangibles that I think that were supposed to make this movie unique only lasted for so long, to a point where I was like, oh, okay, it's just this. Okay. Like,
and I'm like, oh, no wonder why it's so short. Nothing else to talk about.
Pretty much, yeah. This is one of these movies where there was a question on one of the Facebook forums I have for Criterion Collection. And the question was, what movies are you surprised that they're actually in the collection? And I was going to say this, but then this won a special Grand Prix prize at Cannes the year it was released in 1973. A lot of people cite it as something that is very unique and deserves to be recognized and deserves to be preserved. On the one hand, like, I look at the Criterion Collection, even though it's a business and they have movies on there that I personally cannot stand, but I look at it as a boutique label that preserves quality films. And I think, with the exception of just the way it looks and sounds, this really isn't that quality. Like, if this didn't have the unique animation it didn't have, I'd look at this and say, this probably be for kids. This would be a kids movie, really, with, you know.
Well, let's talk about, we were kind of spitballing before, you know, we started recording this episode, and let's talk about the fact that it's PG.
Yeah.
And there is some nudity in it, like, from an animated perspective.
There's a lot of nudity in this.
There's like breasts and, you know.
There's one breast, actually.
No, there's two breasts in it.
Is it? Oh, the drugs. Right. Good point. No, yeah.
the old lady
Oh, I must have blocked that out of my mind.
The old lady, well, because it was like gross looking.
Yeah.
Because her boobs are like all saggy. It was disgusting. I'm like, oh.
Okay.
Like, just let her die.
Oh, gee. I don't like to look at her breast. Let her die.
Like, you're gross. Like, get out of here with that. Like,
some might hear that and say, you know, nude bodies aren't necessarily sexual.
Well, it's like art, right?
Yes. Like, you can look at the Statue of David, and it's not sexualized per se because it has a penis. It's just art to a certain extent. I would kind of say that with this movie, except for the one scene where they're having that ritual, and it's very clear that they're having the ritual to have sex.
Oh, with the lights. Like,
right, with the lights and the women undress in front of everybody and they run into the tree and everything. Like, that would be the one scene, like,
But they don't really, like, show them actually having sex. You know what I mean? It's like the light, but when they take off their clothes, it's kind of like a given.
Yeah, like, when you're an adult, you're like, oh, I see what's happening. But when you're a kid, you're probably looking at it and going, what are they doing?
Why are they naked? Yeah.
I don't get this.
But what about, like, at the end, too, when the drags are meditating and the little balls are, like, on top of the statue heads? Like, and then they're dancing, but I'm like, is that supposed to be a symbol for, like, sex? Or is it not? Or am I reading too much into that?
They say it in the film. That that's how they get their power, and that's how it was through a certain ritual that, I forget the term that they used. But it's kind of like a sexual thing where they get their energy from, essentially.
That's how I took it. I don't know.
That was kind of strange, but not strange enough to warrant seeing the whole 75-minute movie, to be completely honest.
Right.
But
it wasn't any, like, big twist at the end, like, oh, they're dancing, okay.
Yeah, like, it's really it's odd in that way of. There's, like, two different types of weird films to me. There's the ones that are weird and you go, oh my god, this is fascinating. What the fuck am I watching? And then there is the weird movie that I watch and go, god damn it, what the fuck am I watching? So
this movie was the latter.
No, it's the middle. It's squarely in the middle because it's not weird enough. It's strange looking. But when you get to the story, it is, and I keep saying it, it is so basic that there's not a lot to chew on here. Like, if I really want to, and I'm pretty sure people have taken this movie and broken it down to certain parts and go, actually, it's about this. But when I watch this movie, I don't see much of that here, which is what I was really looking for. So I guess people can say, with my criticism of the movie, that I was expecting something more, and maybe I should adjust my expectations when watching this movie, which, okay, fine, you can do that. But those are my expectations, and I came off of this film pretty disappointed.
I was happy because I could follow it. I was like, okay, I understand this. I can read these subtitles and get it. I thought the animation was kind of cool for its time. Other than that, like, I would never rewatch this movie. Like, it's kind of boring to me.
Yeah, I wouldn't either. I'm actually good, essentially, with this. I'm pretty good with this. I think the animation is unique. I think there are other films that have done this before. I think there is a film called
But have they done it before the 70s?
Probably not. I'm not entirely sure.
That's really why I'm curious about that, because I almost feel like it sounds like with the Criterion Collection, like you said, they kind of like house movies too that are like relics. So It's like maybe this was just really new for its time, and so they kind of put it in that bucket of, okay, this was really big in the 70s because it was new and shiny and nobody had done it before, so we're going to kind of make this an archive.
Sure, absolutely. They archived a very important film, one that was believed to be lost, called The Passion of Joan of Arc. This is from the 20s. And
wow.
It's a silent film.
How does that sound familiar? I feel like I've seen that.
If you have, you've seen a great film. But before it might be Criterion, but it might be another group that did this. For a long time, there was an edited version of Passion of Joan of Arc that was shown all over the place, but it was edited. It wasn't the true version. And it was believed that the original version got burnt down in a fire of a church at some point.
Oh.
Decades later, come to find that there is a negative that is untouched that they were able to find, and they were able to get the negative, preserve it, and reshape it to its original vision. Criterion does that a lot with movies as well. But what they do is they then go and sell it because, it costs money to preserve all that stuff and the technology to get that done. So they do that from time to time.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, no, it definitely is. Criterion does a lot of that stuff, and a lot of the movies that they show off as well are like you said, they're relics, or they're films that were important for contemporary films. Like they influence certain other films that are being popular and made today.
Right.
So, yeah, like I definitely can see what you're getting. You're definitely right on that.
But again, like, I think it's only in the Criteria Collection, like, from my opinion and my perspective, because of the animation of that time. Like you said, like, I don't think it has anything to do with the story. Because if it did, then I'd be like, oh, wow, like, I think this movie is not worthy of that.
Well, that, or they couldn't afford the license to Fritz the Cat, but... yeah, like that could be it too. There are people who do really like this movie. We might be in a little bit of an outlier here. I'm not sure what your rating is going to be, but my rating is going to be eh. There are people who really adore this movie and think it's amazing. And, to each their own. Absolutely.
Yeah, for sure. Like, definitely not for me. Like, I thought the animation was pretty cool looking and the music was awesome. But other than that, like, it kind of bored me to death. Yeah, no, I agree. Yeah. There are people who think of this movie very highly, and I got a 7.7 on IMDb.
Right, but there is an importance to the movie too, in the fact that a large audience actually enjoyed the movie at the time, and that it actually won awards. This won at Cannes, which Cannes is a huge deal when it comes to film lovers. When something wins at Cannes, that means it is of a certain quality. And this won the Special Jury Prize, which actually is a big deal. It's not the Palme d'Or, which is the movie of the year, but it won a Special Jury Prize. It interested the jury so much they gave it a special prize on its own. It is basically, I think that... oh, wow. I think that's what it is. I might be wrong. Someone can correct me on that. But yeah, it's definitely a unique movie that caught the attention of film lovers back then. It makes perfect sense it's on the Criterion Collection because there are still people who really like that movie. I guess as time went on, this film is now 60 years old? No, 50 years old. It's 2023. What am I talking about?
And I'm just like, yeah, totally. I'm like, what?
I'm so glad you're paying attention, Kim. No.
Yeah, I'm just like, huh? I'm like, oh, it's like when I was watching the movie.
But the uniqueness of the movie only lasts for so long for me, and then
Yeah, no, I agree with you on that for sure.
Okay. But you mentioned this is the first foreign language film you've seen in a little while, and you said
like that I watched the whole thing through with the subtitles.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so and you were able to sit through it. Is basically
yeah, like I watched it and I was like, because again, like it kept me engaged enough to be like, what's gonna happen at the end? Like some big twist? Is this like, are they gonna like kill everybody and then like have a party? I don't know what's happening. Like, you know, and then it was kind of like a letdown, but I was glad I was able to sit through it and like follow it, because I feel like sometimes subtitles, like it's almost like too fast and then I have trouble reading them and keeping up. But it was such a simple film that I could actually follow it. But then again, like you said, to the latter, it was almost like too simple.
Yeah. I think the cadence of the film too actually helped, because because of the way the animation was, it was like animated voice, and then they stopped to animate something, and then another, and then stop, and another. It was just...
And then they had like animation in between, and it wasn't like continuous talking.
So we will have to see at another... I won't give you another one right away, but we'll have to see if we can if you can handle a more verbose movie that is in a foreign language. So
for sure, yeah. Like I'm up for the challenge.
Nice. That's good. Yeah. That's good. I might pick up some classics then, because there's some really good ones. Okay.
I would probably give this a 1.5 star, just because I really did enjoy the animation for the most part. I think maybe because it just really reminded me of Where the Wild Things Are, and I enjoyed that book as a kid. I also loved the music. I thought it was perfectly timed, but other than that, it just kind of left a lot to be desired for the writing and the storyline itself. There just really wasn't much there. So overall, 1.5 stars. I don't know if I would really recommend this to anyone I know, just because most of, my friends and family aren't into animated films, or maybe they just never gave them a chance. But I just think it's a basic, simplistic, kind of boring film. And maybe for its time, it was in its heyday. I don't know, but maybe that at that time that was a really big deal for animation. Yeah,
I'm going to agree with your rating here. I'm going to give it 1.5 as well. You pretty much nailed every aspect of my issues with the movie. The intangibles, the animation, and the music is good. That's actually pretty quality on its own. But it doesn't have enough to keep you captivated, and the animation isn't unique enough, and what's going on in the story isn't unique enough to keep me satiated throughout the film. I'm giving it 1.5 mainly because I think it's a movie that needed a lot more depth than it had. But will I call it a bad movie? Not necessarily.
No.
I guess with people who are into animation, I would say give it a shot. It's 75 minutes, so you can blow through it real quick. That's the length of maybe 2 anime episodes, so you can sit through that. That's fine. But in the end, I just felt pretty disappointed. I was really expecting something more unique, and all I got was a definitely uniquely animated movie in a very ununique story with very rudimentary characters in this. So nothing really to sink your teeth into, except maybe to just watch the visuals. Like, this would be something if I had like a party filled with that I want to have some kind of art or something that's running on a TV. This might be something I'd pop in as like an interesting talking point. Oh, wow, that's really
like almost like put the film on in the background on silent, and then have like at like an art gallery, right?
Yeah.
Like, people are walking around looking at sculptures or paintings or whatever. That's actually, I think that's where this belongs.
Something along those lines. Yeah. As a film that is to be like entertaining or to be engaging, it just did not engage me on any level. So I agree with Kim, 1.5 stars for A Fantastic Planet.